Just when you thought you had seen it all on the net, comes along an end of life cry in the dark by Mandeep Kaur, who is dead now, posting a video that has shaken each one of us to the roots. In the video, Mandeep narrates her ordeal, her suffering, the daily beatings and harassment she suffered at the hands of her husband Ranjot Veer Sandhu. Even in a cynical world, the sheer helplessness of Mandeep, the outrage we feel for her situation, is unlike anything I've seen on the net for a long time. It makes one think, what is the world coming to? A world supposedly more aware and sensitive of human rights, especially the dignity and well-being of women? How can such an incident happen in the Indian diaspora, and that also in New York? And then the larger picture of our ordeal takes shape, and maybe, just maybe, some answers emerge why even today such incidents occur. Hi, and welcome all to the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis, and my name is Juggi Bhasin. To watch our show, press the big red subscriber button on your screen, and subscription is, of course, completely free. Now, there could be a million reasons that shed some light on the ordeal of Mandeep Kaur. I will not get into that. Frankly, that is a job for law enforcement and even sociologists and psychologists. I want to highlight this episode to talk of hate, which is uncontrollable in many quarters, now making it cruel irony because we live in a supposedly more open, rule-based, liberal environments. And to that end, we have to understand that a Ranjot Veer Sandhu is not an aberration or an isolated case. There are many like him in the Indian diaspora walking the streets, going about their life. People who at first glance are just like the rest of us. What they really are but walking reservoirs of hate and the violence breathing in them just under the surface. Again, I will give the caveat that there could be a million reasons for the hate building up in such people. It could be psychological, parental upbringing, overseas alienation, lack of acceptance in a Western society, or plain simple greed or neurosis that drives such people. All that could be true. But for the purposes of this episode, I would like to highlight a particular trend that has been catching up these last few years. This trend is the culture of free circulation of political hate for individual leaders or political dispensations. I can't remember the last time there was so much of hate directed in some quarters against the current Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Within the Indian diaspora, the Khalistanis do it, and even those elements supporting a so-called autonomous Kashmir. Now, fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, this political hate, despite all the decibel sound and light shows and protests and pyrotechnics, is still an impotent articulation of sorts because it changes nothing on the ground. Not one bit. Even though, ironically, both the extremists and many a times the liberals express their sympathy for this trend. Kashmir is certainly not going anywhere, and Khalistan is not even a pipe dream but a screw-loose fantasy. But the hate generated in this mobilization of the diaspora is very real. And since there has never been and never will be a tangible result coming out of all this, where does this hate which has built up flow out? Nowhere. And then the situation becomes really dangerous when hate-filled individuals take out their frustration on their families and on their spouses. Now, this may or may not be the case in the Mandeep Kaur episode. And this is certainly not taking anything away from the seriousness of the wild atmosphere of patriarchy that rules many segments of the diaspora. But this new trend of political hate has assumed a life form of its own, and it is destroying relationships, creating discord in communities, separating friends from each other, and turning men and women into stunted, bigoted creatures of a kind of dark ages who want to club their political rivals with fierce violence. And this trend is growing. It comes at a time when the real debate should be on psychological disorders, patriarchy, male privilege, and instead, the political hate culture, like an enveloping mist, takes over everything, hides our social deformities, and the violence is always subterraneous, concealed, brimming, waiting to explode anytime. We have to cut through the politicization of our social discourse and see the problem as it is and not as it appears, rose tinted or blood tinted by the politics of the situation. And so, on this note, I come to the end of this episode of the CAA Show. I hope you really enjoyed this particular episode. Till next time, it's goodbye from me and cheers from my end.